The broken shoes and the golden heart. It started in a brightly lit studio filled with loud laughter, elegant clothes and cameras clicking from every corner. People moved with a certain shine, like they knew the world watched them. And maybe it did. It was a talk show, one of the biggest, with top celebrities, polished smiles, and carefully planned jokes. Every guest wore designer shoes, wore watches that cost more than a year's salary, and carried themselves like royalty. Everyone except one. He was just a kid, 12 years old, thin, skin a little dry, jeans a little short, shirt clean but worn at the edges. His sneakers had holes on the side, and the left sole peeled slightly at the front. He tried to hide it by not lifting his foot too much. The boy stood quietly at the edge of the room, clutching a small notebook. He wasn't part of the show, just a visitor, a winner from a small charity contest. The prize was simple: to visit the set, see the stars, and meet someone famous. They chose him because of his essay about dreams. His dream wasn't about riches or fame. He wanted to be kind, just like his late father. But in a room full of fame, kindness is often the quietest voice. As the cameras rolled, the host welcomed Will Smith, the evening's star guest. Will had energy, charm, and a way of owning every room he walked into. He joked, he laughed. The audience loved him. And then, during a break in filming, his eyes caught the boy. Maybe it was the clothes, or the way the kid stood with too much stillness in a room full of motion. Will walked over smiling, but there was something sharp behind it. "Hey, little man," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "You lose your way to wardrobe?" Some people chuckled politely. The boy smiled softly and shook his head. "No, sir, I'm just visiting. I wrote an essay." "Ah," Will interrupted. "Must have been a really good essay to land those shoes on this set." There it was. The laughter came again, this time a little louder, a little harsher. Even the cameras, though not rolling, turned in the boy's direction. He looked down, one hand covering the tear in his sneaker. The other gripped the notebook tighter. No one stopped Will. No one told him to back off. Because sometimes fame gives people a free pass. But not to everyone. From the far side of the studio, a man stood silently, dressed in simple jeans and a black shirt. He had no security guards around him. He didn't wear flashy rings or make loud jokes. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the moment unfold. It was Keanu Reeves. No one noticed him at first. He didn't walk like a superstar. He didn't carry himself with noise. But when he began to move, the mood in the room shifted. People turned slowly, almost confused at first. The laughter faded as Keanu walked straight toward the boy. He didn't look at Will, didn't greet the cameras. He knelt down to the boy's level and looked him in the eyes. "May I see your notebook?" Keanu asked softly. The boy nodded and handed it over, his fingers trembling. Keanu flipped through the pages, and the silence grew heavier with each second. Finally, he spoke, not to the boy, but to the room. "This notebook," he said, holding it gently, "is worth more than anything in this studio." People looked around, confused. Was this a joke? Some waited for a punchline, but none came. Keanu looked up at the audience, his voice calm but firm. This kid didn't ask to be here. He earned his place with words from the heart, and instead of honoring that, we mocked his shoes. He stood slowly, the notebook still in hand. "I've walked red carpets with $1,000 suits. I've owned shoes from designers I can't even pronounce. But I've never seen anyone walk as proudly as this kid just did, in broken sneakers, with a full heart." Will Smith looked away. Others shuffled uncomfortably. The air in the room felt tight. Keanu wasn't done. "We don't measure people by what they wear. We measure them by how they carry others." This boy carried his father's dream in these pages. He brought love into this room, and we gave him shame in return. Then Keanu reached down, removed his own shoes, clean, expensive, black leather, and placed them gently at the boy's feet. "Take mine," he said, smiling softly. "I think they've been waiting for someone like you." The boy blinked. Tears welled in his eyes. He didn't say thank you, not because he forgot, but because the moment swallowed his voice. A few people clapped, hesitant at first, then louder. And louder. Keanu didn't bow, didn't raise his hands. He just turned to Will and said 4 quiet words that melted the entire room. He walked in honor. Will nodded, his smile now gone. For once, the cameras didn't matter. Neither did the fame. What mattered was the silence after those words, and the respect they left behind. And as the boy stood there in Keanu's shoes, holding his notebook to his chest, the world finally saw what it had missed before. A broken sneaker didn't hide a broken soul. It protected a golden heart. Whispers behind the curtains, the studio lights dimmed after the shoot, and the sound of applause faded into soft murmurs. People gathered in corners, whispering about what had just happened. The moment wasn't planned. There were no scripts, no cues, no prepared lines. Keanu Reeves had simply stepped into a moment that wasn't his, and changed it forever. The boy still stood near the edge of the set, wearing Keanu's shoes like they were made of gold. He didn't move much. His small hands still held the notebook, his fingers gripping it as if letting go would make the whole moment disappear. Someone walked up behind him quietly. It was the assistant director, a woman named Sarah, known for running the tightest schedule on set. But now her clipboard hung limp in her arms. "You okay?" she asked gently. The boy nodded. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," she said quickly. "You reminded us why we're really here." He smiled, shy and uncertain, the kind of smile that came from someone used to hiding his hopes. Across the room, Keanu Reeves was still there, sitting alone on a step near the back wall, quietly tying on a borrowed pair of sneakers. Props from the wardrobe department. They didn't fit perfectly, but he didn't complain. When he saw the boy watching him, he gave a small nod. It was the kind of nod that said, "You belong here, you matter." But not everyone in the room shared that feeling. Behind the curtain, in the green room, Will Smith sat with 2 producers. His jaw was tight, his smile fake. The energy around him felt different now, shaken. "What just happened out there?" one producer whispered. "I made a joke," Will replied, brushing lint from his sleeve. "People laughed." "And then they stopped laughing," said the other, "because Keanu turned a joke into a lesson." Will didn't respond. His eyes were on the floor, but not in guilt, more like frustration. He wasn't used to being corrected, especially not in front of cameras, and especially not by someone so silent. Keanu didn't boast, he didn't argue, he didn't shout. He just told the truth, and the room had bowed to it. "We can spin it," one producer offered. "Edit it out, change the angle, make it look like it was all part of the act." But Will shook his head slowly. "No, let it stay." For all his pride, Will knew something rare had happened. He wasn't proud of his words. Not now. Maybe not even when he said them. And somewhere deep in his chest, something moved. Maybe regret. Maybe respect. Meanwhile, in a quiet hallway backstage, Keanu approached the boy. They sat on a small bench, near the exit, away from flashing lights and celebrity chatter. The noise faded into the background as the man and the child sat together like old friends. "You remind me of someone," Keanu said softly. The boy looked up. "Who?" "Me," Keanu replied. "When I was your age, I didn't have much. Just a mother who worked too hard and a heart full of questions." The boy nodded. "I miss my dad. What was he like?" "He used to read my stories, said they made the world feel softer." Keanu smiled. "Sounds like a good man." He was. He told me to always write what I feel, not what others want to hear. Keanu leaned back, eyes thoughtful. He gave you the best gift. The boy opened his notebook and flipped to a new page. He hesitated, then offered it to Keanu. Would you write something? Something I can keep? Keanu took the pen slowly, then scribbled a few words before handing the notebook back. The boy read it, his lips moving as he whispered the words aloud. Never be louder than your heart. The boy looked up again, eyes wide with something deeper, then gratitude, understanding. Will you come back tomorrow? He asked. Keanu smiled. I'll do more than that. I'll bring someone who believes in stories. And he kept his promise. The next day, the boy arrived at the studio again. This time not as a quiet visitor, but as someone people now recognized. Cameras didn't follow the biggest star anymore. They followed the boy in the borrowed leather shoes. But that wasn't the surprise. The real surprise came when Keanu walked in with a special guest. A quiet, elderly man with gray hair, glasses, and soft hands that looked like they turned 1,000 pages in their lifetime. He was a publisher, a real one. This, Keanu said to the boy, is Mr. Prahlad. He reads more than he talks, and he's looking for real stories. The boy blinked. Like mine? Keanu nodded. Just like yours. A new door had opened, not because of money, not because of connections, but because someone chose kindness over silence. And yet, far from the crowd, Will Smith stood near a window, watching everything unfold. He held a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold. His eyes were focused on the boy, on the notebook, on Keanu's quiet strength. He sighed. What am I doing? He whispered to himself, because sometimes the strongest echoes come from the softest voices, and the loudest lessons come from the ones we try to ignore. And in that moment, Will Smith didn't feel like a star. He felt like a student. The speech that made the room go silent, the sun had barely risen, but the studio was already buzzing. Today's schedule was different, rushed, unpredictable. Everyone whispered the same thing. Keanu's bringing the boy again. But this time, it wasn't for a visit. This time the boy would speak. His name was Ayaan. A name few people remembered from the first day, because they had only noticed the shoes, the notebook, the quietness. But now, his name was written on the call sheet. Ayaan, Segment 2, Special Feature. It was small, but it was real. Ayaan sat quietly in the dressing room. Someone had brought him new clothes. Not flashy, just clean and comfortable. He still wore Keanu's shoes, though. He refused to take them off. Outside, the makeup team chatted nervously. Even the host looked tense. Not because Ayaan was difficult, but because the world was watching now. Yesterday's clip had gone viral overnight. Millions had seen Keanu kneel beside a kid with torn shoes. They had heard the words, "He walked in honor." Now everyone wanted to know, who was this boy? In the green room, Keanu sat with Ayaan, legs crossed, calm as ever. He wasn't rehearsing lines. He wasn't coaching the boy. He was just there, being present. You nervous? Keanu asked softly. Ayaan nodded. A little. That's okay, Keanu said. Nerves mean you care. Ayaan took a deep breath. What if they laugh again? Keanu paused, then replied, Let them. But don't let them stop you. You have something they don't. Truth. Ayaan looked down at his notebook. He had written something the night before. It was only one page, but it came from the deepest place in him. Not just about his father, not just about dreams. It was about what he felt the moment Will Smith mocked him, and the moment Keanu lifted him back up. Meanwhile, across the hallway, Will sat alone again. The lights were ready. The show would start soon. His name was still on the schedule, but he didn't feel like himself. Not since that moment. Not since that boy. He opened his phone and scrolled through the video again. Keanu's shoes, the quiet hug, the line about honor. The comments underneath stung more than he expected. This boy is the real star. Will should have apologized. Keanu didn't just act, he led. Will leaned back in the chair. For the first time in a long time, the mirror didn't smile back at him. But then he made a decision. The studio lights turned on. The audience clapped. The host walked on stage, full of energy, but his eyes flickered nervously toward the side. This wasn't just another taping. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "sometimes a single moment reminds us of what truly matters. Today, we welcome a young voice, Ayaan." Ayaan stepped onto the stage slowly. The lights felt like fire. The cameras looked like eyes. But when he reached center stage, he looked at one face in the audience, Keanu's, and he stood a little taller. He opened his notebook and began to read. "I used to think silence meant safety. That if I stayed quiet, no one would laugh. But silence also hides the truth." He paused. The room leaned in. "When I was made fun of, it hurt. Not because I was embarrassed, but because someone famous made it okay for others to laugh at what I could not afford." Gasps, shuffling. But he kept going. But one man didn't laugh. One man saw me. Not my shoes, not my clothes, but me. And he gave me something stronger than fame. He gave me respect. Ayaan closed the notebook but didn't step away. "I'm not angry. I just want people to remember. Kindness costs nothing, and you never know who you might lift when you choose." The room was still, no coughs, no whispers, just quiet tears, soft nods, and hearts being reshaped. And then, without warning, someone stood from the crowd. Will Smith. No cameras followed him. No music played. He just walked slowly to the stage, eyes on Ayaan the whole time. When he reached him, he knelt, just like Keanu had. "I was wrong," he said. The words didn't echo. They didn't shout. They fell gently, but powerfully. "I tried to make a joke, but the truth is, I forgot what it means to really see someone. I'm sorry." He reached out a hand, not for drama, not for forgiveness, just to say he understood now. Ayaan took it. The audience stood. Not for Will, not even for Keanu, but for the boy who walked in broken shoes and left a trail of golden light behind him. Backstage, the publisher who had come with Keanu quietly wiped his glasses and made a call. "Yes," he told his team. "We've found our author." Ayaan didn't know it yet, but his story had just begun to reach the world. The letter that shook the world. Ayaan didn't return to school the next day. Not because he was skipping. Not because he didn't want to. But because something happened after his speech that made everything different. Within hours of his appearance, on the show his words had reached beyond the studio, beyond the city, beyond the country. People from all over the world started sharing the clip. Not because he was famous, not because he was dramatic, but because his truth felt like theirs. Kids who had been mocked for what they wore. Parents who couldn't afford new shoes, teachers who remembered quiet students with big hearts. They all shared his words with tears and pride. And then came the emails. Thousands of them. Ayaan's inbox, once empty, now overflowed. Some came from readers, some from teachers, some from celebrities. But one stood out. It was short. Just one line. "Please keep writing. I've never cried at a talk show before." It was signed by Oprah. Ayaan showed it to Keanu in disbelief. "Is this real?" he whispered. Keanu smiled. "Yes, and so are you." In the days that followed, Ayaan didn't hide. He didn't retreat into fear. Instead, he did what his father would have wanted. He wrote, he filled pages, not with anger, not with blame, but with stories. Stories of how small moments shape big people. Stories of pain turned into light. Stories of a boy with a notebook and broken shoes who chose to walk forward. Keanu read every page. So did the publisher, Mr. Praled. Soon, A quiet plan began to form. Meanwhile, Will Smith was no longer the center of every camera. He didn't try to be. He didn't post statements or hire a PR team to fix his mistake. Instead, he started asking questions no one had heard from him before. "How do I help without stealing the moment?" He asked Keanu this during a late evening phone call. They hadn't spoken privately since that day in the studio. Keanu replied simply, "You listen, and when you speak, speak with care." The next morning, Will did something unexpected. He wrote Ayaan a letter, not a tweet, not a post. A real handwritten letter, folded neatly in an envelope, hand-delivered to Ayaan's home. Ayaan opened it slowly, sitting by the window where his father once read to him. It said, "Dear Ayaan, when I first saw you, I saw a kid who looked out of place. That was my mistake. You weren't out of place. I was out of line. I forgot what it means to be seen, to be respected. You reminded me, not by shouting, not by fighting, but by standing with truth. I've made movies that made people laugh, but you made the world stop and think. And that's bigger than anything I've done. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your grace. I hope one day we can meet again, and this time, I'll listen first." With deep respect, Ayaan folded the letter carefully and placed it in the notebook where he kept Keanu's message. "Never be louder than your heart." He didn't say much, but the smile on his face told his mother everything. By the end of that week, something else happened. Keanu and Mr. Prahlad invited Ayaan to a bookstore downtown, not to buy anything, but to see something. As they walked in, a large poster stood at the front, surrounded by small lights. It showed Ayaan's face, and the title of the book beside it read, "He Walked in Honor, the story of Ayaan." Stared at it in silence. "This is my book?" Keanu nodded. "You're first." Tears filled the boy's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Then write it down," Keanu said softly. "Someone out there needs your words." As customers walked by and stared at the display, many didn't know who Ayaan was. Not yet. But that didn't matter, because the ones who opened the book would see the world through the eyes of someone who knew what it meant to be laughed at. And still choose kindness. Just as Ayaan stepped toward the signing table, he noticed a man walk through the door quietly, wearing a cap low over his eyes. It was Will. He stood at the back, didn't speak, didn't wave. He just waited in line like everyone else. When it was his turn, he handed Ayaan the book to sign. Ayaan looked up. Will smiled and whispered, "Thank you." Ayaan signed his name, paused, then added something next to it. "Be gentle with others. Everyone's shoes tell a story." Will's eyes glistened. Sometimes, it's not the apology that changes the world. It's what comes after. The stage that changed everything, the bookstore event, had ended. But the story didn't. After the first signing, orders for Ayaan's book flooded in from all around the world. Readers in small villages, busy cities, mountain schools, and even refugee camps wrote letters saying, "I felt seen for the first time." Teachers asked for classroom copies. Journalists called it a soft revolution in paper. But one invitation stood out above the rest. The National Educators Summit, held once a year, sent Ayaan a formal letter. They wanted him to speak, not just as a guest, as the keynote speaker, the youngest in the event's history. When Ayaan read the letter, he froze. Not in fear, not in pride, but in something deeper, responsibility. He turned to Keanu, who was sitting beside him with a cup of tea. "What if I mess up?" Ayaan whispered. Keanu leaned forward. "Messing up means you showed up. Most people don't even try," Ayaan looked out the window, eyes deep in thought. "I want to make them feel something. Not just clap, but feel." Keanu smiled gently. "Then speak from the place you wrote from. The part of you that still misses your dad, still wonders why kindness is rare, and still hopes even when others laugh." The day of the summit arrived. The venue was massive. Tall pillars, bright lights, screens showing speakers' names. Thousands of educators, leaders, and students filled the seats. Cameras from news stations lined the back wall. Ayaan sat backstage, wearing a simple grey shirt and slacks. His notebook, now filled with scribbled margins and folded corners, rested on his lap. It wasn't just paper, it was his compass. The stage crew checked his mic. His name flashed across the screen. Ayaan Ali, author of He Walked in Honor and Somewhere in the Crowd, sitting in a middle row wearing dark glasses. And a quiet smile was Keanu. He didn't ask for front seats. He didn't wave to anyone. He was just there, like always, to witness, not to take over. Then, the moment came. Ayaan stepped on stage. He walked slowly, carefully, with each step grounding him. The hall grew quiet. And then he spoke. When I was younger, I thought stories lived in books. I didn't know they lived in shoes too. A soft laugh from the crowd. I wore shoes with holes. I thought that meant I was invisible. But then someone famous made fun of them and I became visible. But for the wrong reason. Eyes locked on him. Hearts opened. I stood there, scared. Not because of the joke, but because everyone laughed with him. And I thought, maybe, I really don't belong. He paused, breathing deeply. But then another man did something I didn't expect. He gave me his shoes, not to fix mine, but to lift me. And in that moment, I learned something. Ayaan walked to the edge of the stage, closer to the audience. Kindness is louder than applause, and respect doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand. A teacher in the second row wiped her eyes. Ayaan continued, "Some of you teach math, some teach science, some teach art, but the most important subject we'll ever teach is how to see each other." There was silence, not awkward, not empty, powerful. He reached into his notebook and pulled out a folded page, his father's last note to him. He unfolded it and read aloud, "Never let the world convince you your worth is small. Those who mock your walk have forgotten how to take one with courage." The crowd rose to their feet, not for a performance, but for a truth. And as Ayaan stepped back, overwhelmed but grounded, the crowd kept clapping. People didn't sit down. Some had tears, some had hands over their hearts. Backstage, Keanu nodded softly. "He did it," he whispered. But something unexpected happened next. The event director rushed to Ayaan and whispered in his ear, "There's someone asking to speak. He says it's important." Ayaan turned and his eyes widened. Will Smith stood just off stage. He had come quietly. No media, no announcement. Just him. Ayaan looked at the director, then nodded. Will walked slowly onto the stage. He faced the crowd, took the mic, and stood silent for a full 10 seconds. Then, softly, he began. "We all make mistakes. Mine happened in front of cameras." The room was still. I said words that hurt, not because I hated, but because I forgot how powerful words are. He looked at Ayaan. But this boy didn't fight me. He didn't shame me. He showed me what grace looks like. And I'm standing. Here to say, I've learned more from him than any script I've ever read. Gasps. Will turned to the crowd. So today, I'm not here as a guest. I'm here as a student. And Ayaan, if you'll allow me, I'd like to start again. Ayaan stepped forward, their eyes met. And in a moment that needed no music, no spotlight, he extended his hand, and Will took it. The audience stood again. Not for fame, not for drama, but for healing. Outside the venue, reporters gathered. But inside, a quiet revolution had taken place. Boy had walked in broken shoes, and now he stood taller than giants. The truth Keanu had been waiting to tell. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city skyline when Ayaan woke the next morning. He sat on his bed, the memory of the night before still fresh. Applause from strangers, tears from teachers. Will Smith's quiet, honest apology. But most of all, he remembered the feeling in his chest. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was peace. For the first time since his father passed, Ayaan felt like the world was listening, not just to his story, but to all the children who were told they didn't belong. He climbed out of bed, picked up his notebook, and added a single line, "I spoke so others could be heard." That same morning, Keanu Reeves waited for him in a small cafe near the bookstore. He sat by the window, sipping tea from a plain white mug, wearing the same kind expression that never changed, even when the world around him did. Ayaan walked in, his shoes now repaired but still Keanu's. They had become something more than footwear now. They were memory, connection, courage. Keanu smiled as he stood to greet him. "Ready?" he asked. Ayaan nodded, unsure what he was getting ready for. Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. It was sealed with a simple red sticker. "What's this?" Ayaan asked, curious. Keanu handed it to him. "Something I've been meaning to give you. I waited until you were ready." Ayaan opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a photo. It showed a young boy, thin, quiet, holding a notebook that looked almost exactly like his. "Is that you?" Ayaan whispered. Keanu nodded slowly. "Yeah, long time ago." Ayaan looked closer. The boy in the picture wore shoes that looked worn down, almost falling apart, and next to him stood a man, older, smiling gently, his hand resting on Keanu's shoulder. "Who's that?" Ayaan asked. Keanu's voice softened. "His name was Daniel. He was the first person who believed in me, a school janitor. He used to find me hiding in the library after class. I didn't have friends, didn't have confidence, but he always brought me stories, told me to write my own." Ayaan looked up, surprised. "Like my dad did?" Keanu nodded. "Exactly. And one day, when some older kids made fun of me for how I dressed, Daniel didn't say much. He just sat beside me, handed me a book, and said, 'You're more than what they see. Wait until they read you.'" Ayaan stared at the photo. The boy in it looked just like him. Same quiet eyes, same worn notebook, same heart. "I never forgot him," Keanu continued. "And when I saw you on that stage, when you stood there with all that weight and still spoke with truth, I saw myself." Ayaan's voice trembled. "Why are you telling me this now?" Keanu took a deep breath. "Because the world already sees you as strong. But I want you to know, you came from a line of strength. You're part of a quiet army. Kids who were overlooked, people who were laughed at, voices that were told to stay silent. But you didn't. And now you're lighting the path for the next one." Ayaan blinked, swallowing the lump in his throat. "And there's something else," Keanu added, reaching into his pocket again. He pulled out a small set of keys. Ayaan looked confused. "What are those?" Keanu placed them on the table gently. "It's a writing center, a small space I bought years ago but never opened. It's been sitting empty, waiting for the right person. Someone who knows what it means to carry dreams in silence. Someone who knows the power of words." Ayaan stared, wide-eyed. "You mean me?" Keanu nodded. "It's yours, to write in, to welcome others, to build something no one can break." With a joke, tears welled in Ayaan's eyes. "I don't know what to say." Keanu leaned forward, smiling. "Then write it." 1 year later, the world had changed. Not because of a movie. Not because of a trend. But because of a boy with a notebook and broken shoes who stood up and spoke. Ayaan's writing center, named the Quiet Corner, opened its doors to children who needed to be heard. No fee, no judgment. Just pens, pages, and peace. Every week, he sat with new kids, ones who felt invisible, unwanted, unsure. He didn't give speeches, he just listened. And then, when they were ready, he'd hand them a fresh notebook and say, "Fill this with who you are." Not who they say you should be. People came from across countries to visit the Quiet Corner. Authors donated books. Actors donated time. And on the wall behind the main desk, framed with soft lights, was a photo of Ayaan, Keanu, and Will Smith, standing side by side, not as celebrities and a child, but as three people who chose to grow. The feed and photo had a single quote underneath. "He walked in honor and left footprints we all follow. And in the end, the boy who once stood in the shadows didn't become famous because of revenge or rage. He became unforgettable because of grace." Ayaan. Didn't change the world all at once. He just told his truth and let it do the rest.